also bear witness to this extraordinary breadth of kind of visual production as much as sonic. But maybe not going back so far as the book is taking us. So the images in the book kind of start in 1973, a favourite year for me nearly as well.
Yes, that's right actually. I mean, at that stage it was far more figurative, but figurative elements have continued to the present day in various forms anyway.
I mean, there are kind of recurring features in a lot of your early visual.
Yeah.
So there's, I kind of see characters moving through. So there tends to be kind of smoky cowboys.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I don't know why particularly. I think I saw a lot of westerns.
Indeed.
At that time, I was interested in the whole mythology of that, but not on a sort of purely sort of conscious level.
I mean, they kind of migrate through some of the images. So there's a kind of wall series, which are kind of essentially.
Oh, that's right. The
1-to-1
Dirty
ratio.
Wall series.
Dirty Wall series, which is kind of like a sort of maximized
Yeah.
kind of frottage of like southeast. Kind of,
That's right. Yeah.
With kind of some kind of graffiti evident and readable, but the cowboys come in. The prospectors kind of appear on one of those series.
Oh, that's right. I mean, sometimes there's two figures and then a section of wall.
And then other kind of things like that I've noticed as kind of recurrent motifs, sort of pylons, machinery, kind of figures like they're from bands, kind of the portraits, and also kind of bottles, hot water bottles, alchemist bottles, objects.
Yeah.
Perhaps objects that kind of sort of precursors to many of the things that you find now on your table of amplified objects. So I was wondering, you kind of hinted at it just there with the kind of the Western thing. Were there kind of cultural kind of touch points for you that kind of influenced the visuals or the kind of worlds that you were building? So you mentioned Westerns, were there kind of other sort of textures within kind of British culture that you were interested in?
I'm not really sure on a purely sort of conscious level. I mean, obviously I watched a lot of television during that time, and as previously mentioned, the Westerns would have been an influence, and perhaps the social realism dramas on TV, and the sort of like Z cars and other things of that kind might have influenced me a bit.
Do you remember watching Rising Down?
Yes, I do, yeah. So I wouldn't say that was a particular influence. That's more your territory, I think.
Well, I suppose something that really stands out with some of the earlier images is Ladybird book illustrations. So that definitely is something that kind of fits through the consciousness of probably many people here.
Because I think on the first or second collage that I made, the sort of more abstract type of work, there are rather Ladybird illustrations. I think there might be one or two. I mean, one was shown on the film, because I like the visual style of it. It's very interesting. And it's interesting to sort of juxtapose that with other things. I mean, the particular collage it showed in the film, they were very large sheets of kind of shiny paper that I found in Camden Town. I don't know if they were book illustrated, they were a bit too big for that, but they were medical photos of people's insides and things. I didn't want to use that to shock people in any way, but they were just interesting textures, and those appeared in several works, I think.
Well, that kind of leads me on, I think, to kind of this idea of texture. So maybe kind of moving on a bit from the earlier pictures, which are predominantly kind of pastel and paint. Sort of collage becomes much more of your kind of operational logic or procedure.
Yeah, that's right. After a certain time. Yeah.
So I would say that there's I am going to say that I think there's a kind of a sort of a logic, kind of parity between the kind of cut-ups and the collages visually, and how you would perhaps employ those methods in your tapes, for instance, in a kind of sonic sense. Would you say there's a kind of similar procedure at work?
Yeah. Yes, certainly. Yeah. Because with the audio tapes, they basically fall into two categories, where I'm kind of referring to particular people, making a tape for particular people. I'll probably refer to their name, and then other tapes that were recorded during a particular period of time or an event, like travelling to a performance and coming back, sort of Easter, Christmas, all this sort of thing, where so I'm not referring to any particular person, so I hang on to the master tape and then sort of make copies to various people, which at the moment, from a purely practical point of view, is very difficult because both my double tape decks are faulty now, and it's very hard, even in a place that sometimes sells them, like the Hartfound taping shop. I've tried several in my area, and they don't sell them at all. So it's kind of stopped me from sending tapes away. In that instance where I want to make a copy from the master, but obviously I can still send those tapes when I'm referring to particular people. That's here in the United States.
We actually kind of sort of first met and started to collaborate now in our trio Deville Mortgage with Jonathan Bohman to perform here on the 22nd of April as a plug for Adam's residency here in April. But we first met because I came across particularly one of your, well actually a CD of your words and music, but I was drawn to the tape track Southend Part 2 because I'm from Southend, and it kind
that's right, yeah.
Magpie sort of inability to sort of ignore that kind of thing. So I wrote to you, and that was kind of the beginning of a kind of, you sent me some tapes originally. That was the kind of first sort of bigger exposure I had, and that kind of is a really important part of your kind of methodology, isn't it, to kind of post tapes? You were part of that kind of tape cassette exchange culture.
Yes, that's right. From around 1986, I was part of the the home taper movement, where I think I found some dresses in a magazine, Underground magazine, and it had listed the main. Some of the main people, Zan Hoffman, who's originally from Louisville in Kentucky, and Al Mojolis, who now lives in Chester, New York State, he lived in the middle of New York, and he formed Sound of Pig tapes. This was before the digital era, and it's now Pogus Productions, which of course I'm friends with them. Obviously, because they're so far away, I don't see them very often. More recently, Kenneth Montgomery, he used to live in New York, he's now in Richmond, Virginia, and in fact, I think we sold it, I only had 3 copies as a CD of me and Jen Ken, so that's why. So it would be a mixture. When I made up a sort of package, a sort of padded envelope, obviously, it would mostly be a mixture of some talking tapes where I would be referring to the particular people, or perhaps other ones where I kept the master, and also to music tapes as well. And hopefully they'd send something back, because I did all the time I've done it. It's not so active now because the more advanced internet, people exchange music. I'm still involved in tape networking, but not so much, obviously, as before. That
recalls to my mind the fact, of course, that kind of effectively a lot of the tapes that you use for kind of sending out are tapes that you get in charity shops to kind of re-record over.
Yes, that's right. I mean, you can still obtain C60s, 90s and other lengths. It's increasingly difficult. I don't tend to use the sort of internet a lot. I'm sure there are sites where you call to all bunch of C90s or whatever. But sometimes I like using pre-recorded tapes. I did pick up a load from the library when the library were transitioning over to digital, and you could leave kind of sections of a book in there, and it provided a very strange juxtaposition, or music of any type. It doesn't actually matter if it's pop or anything else. So most of the tape would be me talking, but suddenly, fairly randomly, you have a piece of music
Well, I remember particularly one of the instances that you said that there'd be you kind of walking in a place in one of your kind of travel tape destinations, or indeed some audio, but then something like from the book Little Women would come through. And I think that's obviously those moments are based on chance and intuition for you, where they kind of bleed through. But I think they're fundamental to the operation, actually, that the fact that they are there on the tape.
Because it's very interesting about making these tapes, because there's an innate kind of contradiction in the whole process, in that if you're making kind of audio tapes of this kind, I never plan them in advance, but obviously you're sort of constructing it in your own mind. You're making very conscious decisions about where to push the pause or the stop. But the fact that you've made a conscious decision to do this means that there's this process that is composed, because I think personally, if you were to plan it all sort of in advance, and I have done that slightly on a sort of couple of occasions where I've had a number of audio tapes and I've just paused them fairly intuitively. But I think it's interesting to just start a tape and see where it goes. And I don't think it matters if you're just recording your ordinary life. There will be a fair amount of repetition, but that repetition will probably be slightly different each time. You can mention things that haven't been mentioned on other sort of tapes.
I remember one of the tapes you sent me, when you're sort of talking to me on the tape, you say that you're going to continue talking because you don't know that there should be any blank space left on the cassette. But that really was interesting to me, because just particularly with your later visual work, there is no negative space. It's filled. The images are completely dense with either biro, tessellations, cut-up images of beans or intestines.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's just a style But it's very interesting you should make that point. I haven't thought about that specifically before, but you're right. I mean, if I have a scene 90, perhaps it's a bit childish. I just always like to fill the whole thing up. I don't like this idea of people perhaps recording it. And this is a different medium, recording a symphony. You've got 10 minutes at the end of the tape. I always feel kind of tempted to kind of fill that in with something. And I do, this is a slightly different area, but particularly with Al. I mean, he's into a lot of modern music, contemporary stuff. And if I record a piece by a contemporary composer, about 10 minutes left at the end, I'm fairly open to all sorts of music. I'll record some rock music, alternative rock, or something that will fill that space.
It won't be Elbow though, will it? It will not.
No, definitely not Elbow.
Elbow is Adam's bête noire. As we learnt, much to our amusement, on our Ipswich tour. We had many jokes about Elbow, enjoyed.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
To return though to the collages then, one title that always brought a lot of joy to me was Fried Egg, Meat and Dark Places, an image you will find in the book when of course you buy it. But that use of dark spaces is interesting, because again there's no white of the page left. And then fried egg and so on. I mean, this can be quite literal sometimes, can't it? So kind of foodstuffs do form the substrate of some of your artwork.
Yes, exactly. And I mentioned in the film that sometimes I leave kind of representational images. I don't do anything with them because the image is so strong, and it's abstract anyway because it's juxtaposed with completely different material.
So that's kind of sign and signifier in a kind of perversion of
yeah, that's right. I mean, you saw that with the parrots. I didn't alter the parrot photos at all. They're just in a book about parrots.
As they should be. So, I mean, we've mentioned the pause a little bit. Obviously, the cut-up, would you say, is a kind of a key method for you, a kind of key procedural method?
Definitely, yeah. There is a relationship between the artwork and sort of cut-up, not a purely conscious one.
But I would say your notion of the pause is kind of your innovative contribution, because the cut-up, I guess, has a kind of Burroughsian lineage, but the pause is, I think, all your own as a kind of method, as a kind of term.
Well, I think, to be perfectly honest, I mean, just the practicality. There are a lot of other people using the pause switch to join sounds together, but with me it's a kind of fairly elaborate process. Record sound textures, all sorts of things. Some instruments, you get some stuff from records. If you want the cello sound, it all sounds different to the original composed music. And then you have all these tapes. You pause them from one to the other. But unfortunately, it sort of comes back to this technological problems now. I did have some small rectangular recorders that were used in the process of making up these sort of sound textures that are all malfunctioned. Now I don't have anything I can double tape deck is useful for that. I don't have anything at the moment that I can produce pause pieces on. You know, sometimes they're multi-track pause pieces, so that's a bit irritating.
I think that's a call for people to buy Adam a new tape deck.
Sort of a whip round.
So thinking then about the fact that these media are kind of degenerating before our eyes and arguably sometimes not replaceable, especially the old tapes, they are a kind of finite resource, despite of course the popularity of cassette tapes again, but it's not the same as one from the 70s or 80s, or sorry, 70s would be too early, right, for tapes, 80s. Where was I going with that? The kind of the bleeding of kind of necessity in life, I guess, into your method then, and where the decisions made about what to include on a travel tape, where does kind of chance or kind of decision is? I guess it's a difficult thing to answer that. But how do you decide what to include? Because you kind of are a maximalist in your tapes, and that you're kind of recording everything.
That's very interesting. Talking specifically about the trips, I call them the trips tape, where I'd obviously kind of hold on to the master tape. I mean, there have been trips that I've done where I haven't done that, but there are very different contexts where you choose to visit a particular place. I went to Dorking, for instance, which isn't the most interesting town in Surrey, and had a look round there. But that hardly matters, really. You just have to make a tape, even if it's really boring, it can still be interesting because you know, I mean, it's highly subjective. You know, what's boring to one person is not to another, and sometimes you're not able to kind of make those kind of distinctions. They're not very important anyway. That sort of thing. You know, it's just an experience. You know, being taken to Dorking. You know.
Not as good as Southampton. But you're a great diarist as well, aren't you? So you haven't really missed many days at all keeping your diary since what days?
Well, no. I mean, I've kept a page-a-day diary since about 1978, and it's a sort of discipline in the sense that you can't really leave it for too long. You usually write it last thing at night or first thing in the morning. If you leave it more than 4 days, you can't remember.
I think that's a very good
exactly what's happened.
Yeah. But talking about that really important kind of element of the kind of the joy in the quotidian, or the kind of the glimmer of kind of sort of ecstasy in the trash substratum. I mean, you mentioned on the video, we've talked about this because it's something I feel kind of close to as well. Kind of making use of the resources of being in a workplace. And so
yes, exactly. Yeah, because obviously in the sort of office environment, they weren't kind of checking what people use every second. So a lot of fluorescent felt tip pens, borrows, and ink pads, or any of ink pads.
As you kind of masterfully described, the kind of the syntax of the office kind of meted out through the visuals, through the kind of circles for the holes, through the photocopying, to provide its own kind of process, doesn't it? Procedural method.
And the particular type of paper they used to use, there used to be this term like the plain paper photocopier, and another type of paper that's more acidy, almost damp, that produces very different situations. If you use a date stamp and smudge it on this paper, it's absolutely perfect, but perhaps not so effective on ordinary paper.
Yeah, I was particularly interested to hear about the kind of the procedural methods of using damp paper, of course, as a kind of agent as much as anything else. So that was a great point of commonality. I mean, I hasten to suggest, maybe I'm wrong, I think maybe the kind of takeaway menu, it kind of replaced the kind of the office space as a kind of working method, because the takeaway menu is kind of increasing rapidity.
Yeah, you could say that. I use a lot of menus to find words. Just an abstract. To have the menu items included in the sort of text pieces.
And of course visually as well.
That's right, the kind of the
food labels.
Photos of the pizza, of the meat and everything else, you can use that.
As much as the kind of advertising slogans and signifiers of the food, as much as the images themselves of it.
Yeah.
Just to return to the cut-up then, so your text pieces, we're going to be performing, hearing some of that today, aren't we? Which book is it based on today?
Well, I'll introduce them kind of separately. Very short introduction, because later on we'll be doing some ensemble text pieces. But after the break, I'm going to be doing some solo material. But I'll introduce that a bit later. But yeah, that's right. Just a lot of different sources. As previously mentioned, the stuff from the menus, but also books and magazines, anything that's available, kind of fast food and junk mail.
Lots of sources, but also lots of sources in the condiment sense. Mustard, I think, has played.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which it does also for me as a great kind of a multi-dimensional substance. The sonic capacities of the mustard tin jar. I've noticed it on your table before. I've got here humour as method as well. How much do you foreground that?
Well, it's very interesting about that. I don't see myself as a comedian as such. Kind of funny elements in there, so it's all slightly ambiguous. I wouldn't want to appear kind of po-faced. There are, but there's a particular texture. This is just mentioned. This isn't particularly humorous as such. It's just taking two very different types of material that are linked from a kind of linguistic point of view. There's a piece that appears in several different versions called Ivy Leaf. So I had this kind of 10-inch record of Ivy League songs, and then a book about Ivy, and both of those are mixed together, finding words within different. There was an instrumental version with two people who unfortunately aren't here, friends who are saxophonists, Sue Lynch and Adrian Northover, and that was a version of the piece where they learnt on the saxophone these Ivy League songs. And then we sort of included text about Ivy League universities and Ivy the plant. And so that's just one example that was kind of slightly humorous, I'd say.
It's definitely wordplay. Maybe we should open up to some audience questions.
Fine, yeah. Let's ask a question.
I've got one. Yeah. Adam, if you were about to be executed, what would be your last meal?
It's very hard to say. I know that you're supposed to receive a last meal. I don't know if that actually kind of happens in prisons. Probably a boiled egg or something fairly ordinary. But I suppose you could, or if it was your last meal, they say that you can order sort of anything at all, but I don't think that's realistic. It would probably be what was provided by the sort of prison sort of kitchen. That would be the extent of it. So certainly an egg with something. But certainly an egg and toast.
Why are you being executed?
Sorry?
Why are you being executed?
I don't know. I've absolutely no idea why they would want to execute me at this point. Unless I murder someone in the future, I really don't know. There's no answer to that, really.
Just feeling America.
Sorry?
Just being in America.
Oh, right, yeah.
Can I ask a question? Just a question, not a contribution to the improvised comedy sketch that's just happened. But it was a very interesting discussion, and I really liked the film. And you focused on procedure and method and the formal elements of the piece. I don't know apart from what I've seen here. But I just wondered about other contexts. I mean, there is a sort of like feeling of kind of 70s security or something or bedsit security or something. But I just wondered about the emotional or the political or the social or sociological sort of why of your work, or are you working purely procedurally?
Well, I don't know about that really. To be perfectly honest, I haven't thought about those things a great deal. But I think that they will probably come over on a subconscious level. People will pick up what sort of environment it's been made in. And I've always made a sort of as I shouldn't say that because it's a bit too revealing, which is what you're saying about the emotional thing, is that if you're producing these tapes, this is just purely my opinion, if you went into too much detail, too much personal detail, you'd only be able to do about 4 or 5 sort of tapes. If it's like a Woody Allen type of confessional, then I mean, obviously there's hundreds of others example. It would kind of prevent you from doing much more. People say, "Oh, I've heard everything I want to hear about this person. I won't have any want to have any more." I suppose it's just personal choice. Other people might do tapes that do much more personal material. But it is a personal choice not to include too much. I think you'd limit yourself a bit.
In terms of the technology, I don't get the sense that you're trying to hold on to the past when you're talking about the tape decks, or to fix the damaged past by, looking for repairs and stuff. But what are you doing in regard to the past, in terms of tape decks and double tape recording? Are you trying to hold on to something, or to stay in the past, or anything like that?
No, not really. Is it perfectly honest? I'm not trying to stay in the past. From a practical level, I'm using that sort of earlier technology. It's much better. C90s and C60s tapes are very useful. I mean, perhaps there is part of me that does want to stand past away. It's just that I'm not a very sort of high-tech person anyway, and I prefer using that medium. But it doesn't mean to say that the sort of tapes are old-fashioned in that way. I mean, I'll talk about a lot of different things.
Adam has a real a feel for the kind of the textural quality of the media.
Yes, it's just the physicality of the pause switch and the record, which you wouldn't really get using more digital stuff, But I don't have anything against digital technology. I mean, I have
But there's a real synergy, isn't there, between the portability of being able to walk and move, the kind of peripatetic tape, the tape Walkman. All these things are a kind of imbrication one to the other. That is such a kind of rich practice. It's not a kind of a nostalgic thing. It's a kind of entirely embodied, necessary thing, I think. And to that kind of point about kind of the sociological or kind of political wider implications. I mean, Francis Bacon said that all the images around him kind of seep in like a kind of compost, and eventually he'll make these paintings. And he's kind of a machine for kind of producing, kind of mediating so many kind of forces of kind of cultural, imagistic forces. So,
but also I think that there's so much kind of talk about visually what you're doing at any particular time. There is a sort of element of social realism there that you don't need to talk about all this other stuff. And as I said before, it's actually limit yourself by talking too much. I mean, I do say sometimes I'm a bit cheesed off or not feeling slightly depressed, but I don't really want to spend the whole side talking about that. I don't think that's, I can't see the point of it really.
One more. Yeah, hi Adam. I have a question about the instruments you make and the found objects you use to make your sounds. When you do a live concert, they're sort of laid out on a table and they look amazing and they look like a kind of collage themselves. So I was wondering, is there an analogy between the way you work with these objects and instruments and the way you work with collage?
Yeah, once more, it's not a sort of purely conscious thing. But you're right, there probably is an analogy between that, because they're all kind of set out in some sort of order. There's wood, polystyrene, plastic, and then metal and springs, and then I put them all together. So you're right, there probably is a connection there somewhere.
As much as there is a sort of sonic interest in the multiple textures that are evoked by all the amplified objects.
I would agree, yeah.
I think we'll take a break and come back because Adam's got a lot of music to play. Thank you so much.
Sorry if I was getting in the way of it.
No, that's part
I was
of
quite
it.
conscious of being stood directly in front and I didn't want to block it.
Well, don't worry. I was focusing in on the 2 minutes. So it's okay.
Okay, excellent.
No problem.
Sorry.
No.